Good evening and welcome to Literature in 60 Minutes. My name is Zandile Pooe, and tonight I have a very, very special guest. Her name is Thobeka Dlamini, and she is the author of Teaching Impacts Generations. And I would like to just unpack the subject of teachers. I mean, teachers are such a fundamental building block in our society because they teach our children, which is the next generation, and what we got taught, we essentially tend to pass on to the next generation. So I think it's important, the work that she's put together and how it can help us reflect on either historically what we have done or looking forward what we can improve on and do better. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure. You are such a delightful person. Yes, I'm so happy to have you in studio.
But I've enjoyed your personality as well.
But I think let's just get right into it. Your title, first things first.
Yes.
Teaching Impacts Generation. It's self-explanatory, but I'd like to get a picture of what you had in mind when you decided to choose that title.
Yeah, I thought it would really stand out to specify the teaching because teachers are often overlooked, and I could have written anything else. I mean, the initial title was Generational Impact, but then generational impact could be anything from pastoring to business or whatever the case is. So I thought, no, let me narrow it down, so that I narrow it down to teaching, so that it's specific, that we are acknowledging the role that teachers play in impacting our generation. So it would have been generic if I didn't put teaching there. So I specified and wrote teaching because I wanted them to know that there are people that do acknowledge what they do, and there is really a fundamental role that they play in the society, which we don't often discuss or we don't often acknowledge. Yeah, that's how the title came about.
And sometimes behind a story there's always a backstory. So tell us.
Yeah,
I think that's how you start the book. You start with your backstory.
Yeah, there's always a backstory. I mean, when I started off the book, I first of all in the foreword of the book, I touched on a little bit on how I came to write this book. I work with young girls in Gwandebele, which is a rural area in Mpumalanga, and upon interaction, I got to understand some of the challenges that they go through within their households. And, it sort of pricked my mind that if a child can go through so much with a parent being there, how does that translate to the learning environment where they have to be there every day, but carrying so many loads from their backgrounds or from their families. And so that is what sparked the idea of writing this book, to say if a teacher is dealing with 40 kids in one class from completely different backgrounds, some are from child-headed households, some are from abusive households. How do you then teach 40 people whose minds are probably all over the show because of some of the things that they go through in their background? So I thought this should be quite hard for teachers. It's something that we never think about. We just always think about them imparting knowledge, but never really think about how tough it is to actually achieve that.
Yeah.
Because children are going through the most, through rape and all sorts of things, in the era that we live in. So that was what sparked the idea of putting this together. Just it's not a very thick book, but I believe it's got enough content to say to the teacher, you have what it takes, and this is how you identify a child that has issues or problems from their background. And so as well, my backstory is that I was not the brightest in school. And it took a teacher to point out my strength. Wow. That's why I'm an author today. I didn't know that I had that ability. I didn't know that I had the ability to speak publicly in front of people. But she noted that, even though she's not as bright with other subjects, but she's really gifted in writing and in speaking. And for a teacher to point that out to a child who's trying to find their strengths in the world, because in the schooling system our strengths are always compared to other people's strengths.
Very true.
And so once you in the schooling system, you're trying to find your space in the world in terms of your abilities. And I thought if teachers could be alerted of the power that they hold in affirming a child, in pointing out the good in a child, the child might actually end up utilizing those things in the long run. So that's how teachers impact generations. So my English teacher, she's now in Australia. I've been in contact with her. Even when I was writing this book, I spoke to her about it and told her that I've featured a little bit of her story in the book. She was the strictest teacher at school, but for her to point out my strength and not highlight the fact that I'm not as
your
bright as a student. That's why I'm an author today.
Wow.
Okay, and I'll be writing more books hopefully in the future.
That is so profound. And I think you are so right in very many respects. It's a very complex environment that teachers operate in. And we only look at it in a very linear way. Like standing in front of the class, teach the children. And there's so much that goes into it. And I think later on in your book, you talk about emotional intelligence, which is something we'll get to it. But I think there are so many challenges that just confront a teacher just by walking into the classroom without even opening a test book or the lesson plan for the day.
Definitely.
And we don't, we're not sensitive to those things a lot of the time. And I love how you're pointing out, how your teachers pointed out your strengths, because there's also, some differences in how other people have experienced their teachers.
No, definitely.
They've experienced the other side where a teacher called them, stupid and told them they weren't competent
or
and they weren't
learners.
Or they won't be able to make it in life because of all of those. So I love how you're pointing out a success story that has bear fruit in your life. Definitely. And I think it's just a message to every teacher who's out there for them to recognize the level of impact that they have in the lives of the children. But now let's confront more of the challenges that they have, because I think not being sensitive, like I said, to that leads to some of the apathy that we have, that we're just like, they must just teach.
And they must get their job done.
They must just teach.
They do it.
Also, like they get paid too much. They knock off at 2 and what all these other things. Because we have these preconceived ideas of what the teaching profession entails.
Now, I'll highlight just a few of their challenges. One of the first challenges we're having, I'm going to obviously talk from the South African context. I do highlight on some of the strengths that they have, and that one of them is overcrowding in classrooms. And in trying to manage 40 or 50 personalities at a time, and with all the challenges that we have in the education sector, that can be a challenge, because you can't pick up whether people are understanding your work. You only pick up when the results come in that some kids are not really on par in terms of the learning process, in terms of taking in all the knowledge that they are supposed to take in. And so it is a challenge, the issue of infrastructure, and just overcrowding in schools, because it's difficult to teach 20 kids in a class. How much more if you're teaching double that number, together with all the background issues that children come with. You find yourself struggling to manage the classroom, and even though you are teaching and you are a good teacher, and you have a way of relating information in a way that a child can understand and you can break down concepts, but you find that you are exhausted from trying to manage so many personalities at the same time. And the second challenge that teachers are facing, obviously they struggled slightly with the curriculum issues because of the time frames that they are given to cover the syllabus. Sometimes they have to rush through concepts because of certain set standards that they have to achieve within a certain space of time. And some teachers, sometimes they crook the system and actually give the same assessments. They cheat and give the same assessments, maybe twice so that it can reflect good on them, and obviously there's a lot of admin that comes with being a teacher. So even if they're knocking off at 2 or 2:30, they have to spend maybe another 2 hours preparing for lessons on that day, and maybe catching up on their marking, whatever the case may be. So you find that a teacher is actually, overloaded in terms of administration and in terms of the workload within the school setup. Then it's the lack of parental involvement. Oof. Because you're trying to give a child a certain, moral code for life. Because remember, you are teaching more than the curriculum.
Exactly.
You are teaching discipline, you are teaching etiquette, you are teaching please, sorry, the things that children need, to interact with other individuals as they integrate into the community. And you find that is not enforced at home. So you can sort of become the how do I call it? You sort of become the strange one in the child's world to say, no, but at home, this is how my mom talks to my dad.
Yeah.
So why should I say please and why should I say thank you? And so they finding the lack of parental involvement in the children's lives also a challenge, because they are enforcing principles that are not enforced at home. And sometimes there's a clash. And so I do go a little bit into detail about how some kids really look up to teachers as the sole authority figure in their parental figure, because they have absent parents. And sometimes, you would think that it's the poor kids that have absent parents.
Come
the rich
on,
kids,
tell us about
the rich kids.
And I think more especially because we just I pay too much money to be doing your homework with you.
Exactly. So we outsource. I mean, if you're rich, you outsource everything. I'll get you a tutor. I'll do this.
True.
I'll send you to hockey. I'll send you to soccer. But you find that sometimes with the rich parents, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being rich. I'm not bashing that. But you find that in the process of building legacy, maybe financial legacy for your children, there might be some sense of neglect.
Yeah.
And usually those parents also put a lot of pressure on the kids without understanding their world. You must get 80%, you must get 90%, you must. So that you find that you have a child who's resentful and a child who's emotionally unhealthy within the classroom, because now the parent is always away, but when they come back, they demand results. And they were never there for the child emotionally, academically,
there's
there's no balance. And so some of these kids are very lonely and very mischievous, because in the absence of their parents, they try new things, and they're trying to fill that void, in all the wrong way, and they have the money, so they can quickly Uber to a club or do that. So we
vape. The other day I heard about vaping. I was like, what is vaping?
What is vaping?
Then I discovered everywhere I go now there's a vape lounge. I'm like, how have I been missing this thing?
No, things have changed completely. And that's why we need to encourage teachers, because they're spending most of the time with the kids. So they actually can take 5 minutes of their lesson a day to just mentally shift the child's focus to other things, through teaching and through motivation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think you follow up with just the perfect chapter to say who is in your classroom, because these very kids, like we're talking, very different background, very different LSMs, social, upbringing. So how does a teacher then navigate through that minefield or maze of different personalities and characters and upbringings and social dynamics to bring across the substance of learning?
Listen, I'll be honest with you. If I was a doctorate student, I would have written maybe a book that's like 4 times the size that I've written.
Tell us about
what I've written, I think, is enough to get the teacher going in the area of accommodating all these children. But what I've done, I've sort of given a background of the diversity in the classroom. So we've got those that are probably have been raped or abused in any other way, and then I put the symptoms in terms of the child's personality, what would usually reflect on a child, what to look out for. Then I also touched on the issue of poverty. that there are children that basically wake up and go to school having eaten nothing in the morning. And how do you see the signs of a child that is living in poverty? Some of them may look neat on the outside, but you find that they're drowsy, they are sleeping in class, they've got concentration issues. You understand, because they are malnutritioned and so forth, and they have self-esteem issues because all the other kids have got lunch and all this. So I sort of touch on each background, including orphans. How can you tell when a child is an orphan? What are some of the signs to look for? And then I just by not giving the book away a lot, but I touch on one of the psychologist theories of one philosopher to say, what is the basic need of every human being, whether abused or poor or orphaned or neglected, rich and neglected? What is the basic need of every human being that is breathing? And we can based on that theory, come to about 3 needs of every human being that is breathing. And if we can cater for those needs, we can be able to now transition the child from, yes, they are from that environment, but we can shape their mindset to say there's still something more for you despite where you are. So it's not about eliminating the problem. The problem is going to be there probably throughout their schooling career, but you are now helping the child to see a different perspective of life, because all they are seeing is what is around them. And so that's why the teacher holds so much power to open those avenues to say this is not all there is to your life. And so I'm not going to give away the 3.
No, that's why you buy the book. But I think essentially you speak of what can be done. And I think I can right now think of a plethora of things that I would personally do. But I don't think a lot of them would be practical and applicable in the teaching environments, especially because we are not just talking about your private school teacher.
Yes.
We are talking about your public school teacher. And those are the teachers that actually bring out the masses of the children in our country. It's not, the private schooling environment. So when we talk of public issues that affect the masses, I've just recognized that teacher appreciation from the parenting side goes a long way.
No, definitely.
It really goes a long way. And I think our government maybe tries, but is also limited in some of the resources.
No, definitely.
So as parents, with as little as you have, what are some of the recommendations that you can note?
Well, coming from the parent side, though it's not in the book, but coming from the parent side, I think there's a lot that you can do. I don't really think that it's gifts and that make a difference. Sometimes I think it's just organizing something for teachers at the end of the year where you can note on the lives that they've touched. You collect testimonials from the children and you read out, because what we need, there are a lot of people that are doing significant work in the world, and unfortunately financially they're not compensated for that work. But I think it makes a huge difference to know that you've made a difference, even though your pocket is not as fat as other careers, but to know you've touched a life in this way, or you've encouraged a child in this way. I think it's the small things that go a long way. It's not the expensive gifts. If you can afford expensive gifts, by all means. But what I'm trying to put across is that sometimes people that are doing significant work, all they need is just affirmation to say that your presence does matter, and though we value you, that's why my heart has been really broken with the whole COVID situation. I would have expected that by now there would be a plan to compensate those that have been in the forefront of the war, because teachers are also at the forefront of the war. So I feel even with doctors and nurses, something should have been done to say,
with all that stimulus packages, something should have.
Exactly. You've been emotionally stretched. You have been absent for your families for a space of 2 years now.
You've been risking your own life.
You've been risking your own lives, having young children, having kids to raise, to say we'll be at the forefront until we defeat whatever we're facing. So you can imagine, for a teacher, you are basically teachers are in a war zone. You know, they are fighting for, you know, the moral fiber of our society that is declining, and, you know, the moral decay is just ridiculous, you know, in our time. And so they are fighting a battle of their own, and they are trying to impact children that are already distraught from their own families. And so sometimes, even if you can't get the monetary you know, appreciation, at least get the verbal appreciation for whatever that you're doing.
I agree. And I think when it comes to a lot of teachers, they serve for so long, especially in the same schools a lot of the time.
Yes.
Because I can tell you now, some of my primary school teachers, when I went back, like, I think when I had just graduated, they were still there.
They were still
you
there.
know?
Yeah.
And just going back to say, oh, I studied, this is what I've done. And they're so happy for you. You know,
something.
It does a lot. Like they remember you.
Yeah.
This is the thing that really touches me about your teachers. Is that they will remember you to say, oh, you were this. Look at you now, you know. And it's such a validation, I think, to you when you have passed like maybe 10, 12 years since you've been under the tutelage of that person, and they still remember what you were like.
You're not just a face in the crowd.
I'm telling you,
to them you're not just a face
so
in the
compelling.
crowd. It's amazing what they do, really. I mean, both my parents were educators, and sometimes we would be walking you know, in the mall in Richards Bay, and you'd see a very old man coming forth and saying, oh, this was my school teacher, and you will actually see
the joy
and immediately you walk away. My dad would tell us a story, oh, by the way, this guy was like this and this. So they really recall their students, because it's a significant amount of time that you spend in a child's life. You can't just erase it. So the whole book is really about make that time count. You know, make your service to your generation count. Don't be a pessimist. Don't be one that pulls other kids down, because those are the things that will never leave those children. So it's more about conscientizing them that, you know, their role is, well, it's the mother of all other professions. So in other words, they are the foundation of society.
Sure, putting it that way is like it hits home.
Without them, we don't have doctors, we don't have engineers, we don't have politicians, we don't. So every great mind and every innovative mind has gone through a teacher.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's set in a very special place in me. When you put it, it's the mother of all professions.
Yes.
And you are so right, because as going back to you saying that a teacher inspired you and lifted you, reflected to you what you were that you couldn't even see in yourself. You know, so can you imagine all the more some of the people who choose certain careers based on what a teacher had recommended to them, to say, maybe you should try doing this.
Be a doctor, be this. You know, you could even just, you know, with your mind, just make it a visual thing to say, if a teacher has encouraged a child to be a doctor, lives are saved today in their thousands, if not millions, all over the world, because a teacher saw a strength and said, no, I think you should take these subjects, you good in this, and channel the child according to their strengths. And so it really does have a ripple effect. Because without a teacher that believes in you, you know you're good, but you're not so sure. So even the bright ones, they want the affirmation of the teacher to say, oh, okay, how much did I get? Oh, you got a 95%. They still want to hear that you are that great, you know, even though they've seen the marks, you understand? So, their authority figure in a child's life really goes a long way.
Now let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is sometimes people go into the teaching profession as a alternative, not as I wanted to do this. This is my passion. I love children, but it was like, okay, I can't do anything else. So let me go teach. So now you have that I think maybe psychological disposition that
You are
is
detached.
you are detached, you are disappointed.
Yeah.
This is not what I was supposed to be in life, and here these kids irritating me or whatever, you know, the psychological disposition is, which bleeds into emotional sort of like turmoil that can come with it.
True.
And that gets manifested in the classroom environment.
I always say teaching is a calling. You know, it's really a vocation, because I'm also aware that there are quite a significant number of teachers that just thought, okay, that's, you know, especially with us coming from that disadvantaged backgrounds, you find that you finish matric, there's no bursary, and then you decide, oh no, because there's no bursary, I'll just get a bursary and do teaching or nursing. It's the same as nursing, because those are the bursaries that would be readily available no matter your M score. Sometimes it will be an M score issue. You know, I struggled to get into psychology or being a doctor or being a physiotherapist, so the next thing is teaching. But I was giving a talk at a school last year, which was very tense, you know, because I was highlighting that there are so many graduates that are sitting at home who are educators, whose spaces are filled by people that are not called into that vocation. And you know, I could see the teachers were not very happy with me, but I had to highlight to it that if teaching is not for you, rather go and, you know, get a piece of land and do farming, do something else, but never abuse the position of power that you have been given. Because once you are a teacher, you are a leader automatically. And if you don't have the heart for it, and if for you it's just for the check or whatever the case is, you become a danger to those that you are leading. Because on your worst days, you could, you know, lose it and really affect the emotional lives of many children. And so do find something else to do. I know that there are no jobs, you know, there's such a scarcity of jobs, but I would rather have the teachers sitting at home without jobs that have the passion for the profession, you know, come into the field, than to have people in the field that are really discrediting the profession in a lot of ways. So, you know, teaching is a very sensitive thing. It's like you are just handed somebody's life, and you need to make sure that it's safe in your hands, and you nurture it to fruition. So if there are teachers that are really in the field without the heart for what they are doing, maybe they can study further whilst they are teaching, in order to venture to somebody else, to something else. We understand that, you know, there's a scarcity of jobs, but it would help to take other things part-time and then decide to know, I'm diverting to this. But to spend 20 years of your life as a pessimistic teacher, I think for me is a waste of your time.
But
it's a waste of your abilities.
Carnage.
Yes, and the emotional damage in those classrooms, you know, we can't even measure it, because we don't know who's in that classroom.
Exactly.
And, you know, it might be our next president who's being affected, you know, so, you know, the ripple effect is just so serious. So we do encourage that if teachers are finding themselves unhappy in the profession, rather study part-time and up your skills, and then venture into something else, you know, or venture into coaching if it's something that you enjoy, because you're already a teacher. You just need to add certain things to be able to venture into a different stream or a different profession. So I don't suggest, especially in the era we live in. I think COVID has just taught us to just live unapologetically. And so most people at this point are really taking the leap because they feel, you know, I've been spared from the worst. I can't now live a second option of my life. You know, I must live my life the way I intended, because, you know, time is just not guaranteed. So for me, my conviction is that you can't be a teacher for 20 years and you don't enjoy it. You know, rather, you know, if you're doing something you are called to do, even if it has challenges, but you push through, because that's what you're supposed to be doing.
And having the requisite emotional maturity, because like you're saying, there are a myriad of challenges. You definitely will be confronted by one thing or another on a daily basis. Because sometimes, as much as we would love to believe that, children are teachable, children can be, groomed and everything, some children are just like, no.
Hitting a rock.
Like, I am not.
Like pouring water on a rock.
You understand?
Yeah.
So some children are like that, and that could be, I'm sure that could be a difficult thing and exhausting, because some kids are just rude, they're obnoxious, they are just intolerable. So if you are going to deal with something like that over years and years and years, because sometimes they say you have to have one.
Yeah.
There's definitely, in a class of 40,
True.
yeah, you definitely might have
more
one.
than one.
Sometimes, and then how do you then have and the emotional maturity
Stamina,
to navigate and stamina to navigate that environment and terrain for over years. So it's important for
you to love what you do
and to be equipped. So I think this is more a message for teachers, but as well as institutions like government, because if you are going to put people in an environment where they are constantly dealing with a complexity of personality, they need to be equipped. If they don't end up displaying, the perfect emotional maturity indicators, they're human beings, but at least they will know what can and they cannot do in certain environments. So I think that's key.
I actually give a recommendation in the book to say that maybe our higher education institutions should include psychology as a major for all teachers, whether you're a maths teacher, Zulu teacher, science teacher, because you need the basics of human behavior and of understanding how humans react to stimuli and how humans react to the environment, to be able to spot things from afar, to say, okay, that's the problem, I understand what's going on, and not get emotional about it. So if a child is going to be rude to you the whole time, you already know that child is from a troubled background. It's not necessarily about you. It's not about them disrespecting you, but there's a bigger issue they're dealing with, and you go to and usually the teachers that confront those kids one-on-one get to the core of the issue, and it's usually in their background. So the children that are the most rebellious are the children that are the most troubled.
That's an interesting perspective.
So now if you internalize everything, you will react according to your emotions, because you don't understand the child is looking for attention because they are troubled within themselves.
It's a lesson for adults as well.
Yeah,
if you see some troubled beings, don't take it personally.
Just walk on. Well, that's my philosophy. If I really meet a very difficult person, my husband was actually saying yesterday, you actually let go of things very easily. I said, no, I had to teach myself. When I see drama, then I know the drama is inside. Like, it's not
this
just me.
This person is projecting, so I am not going to catch on.
I'm not even going. No, I won't hurt my feelings. I'm not going to entertain it. They must find a solution themselves. If I can help them, I can. But if they are too obnoxious, then it's more like, I'm not joining your drama.
You'll figure it out somewhere else, but
I'm not
here.
joining you. So,
and because an emotional maturity will lead to something that is very significant, which is just the crux of what teachers do, is to communicate. They communicate information, they communicate the lesson, they impart. So when that part of them is not in the right place, it affects that.
It does affect that. But how you put your message across.
But tell us more about the communication aspect of teaching.
Well, I did touch on it a little bit towards the end of the book, to say that obviously communication, it's the sender of the message, it's the message, then it's the receiver of the message. But I do speak about encoding. That the issue is now in the encoding, because of the different backgrounds that I highlighted. Some kids don't receive information the same way as other kids. So I touch on a little bit of diversity and creativity in how you put your message across, because you've got the creative child who cannot relate to the theory. Like at varsity, I deregistered philosophy. I found it intriguing, but the lecturer was not making it interesting for me.
Wow.
So philosophy was very intriguing for me, but the lecturer I was struggling to encode the information whenever he stood in front of us. So I deregistered it because I was scared of failing it. So I deregistered it before I could fail it, because I felt this thing is it's interesting, but I'm struggling to really
the vehicle
embed,
that's delivering the message.
Exactly. So I talked a little bit that the kids are diverse in the classroom. You have creative minds, and they get bored with the monotonous way of teaching. So you have to flip your presentation skills in the way you present the subjects to make it more interesting, to make it diverse, so that you can accommodate your theory children and your creative minds as well within the classroom.
Left brain, right brain.
Yes. So you can't just be streamlined and just stand there and just ramble on and on. And these are skills that you can polish. You're not born with them. We're not born with communication skills. We're not born with emotional intelligence. It's things that we need to develop. And so extra reading on, how can you stimulate kids in the classroom? Sometimes you can start with a joke at the beginning of the class. That's always the one. People that make you laugh, you gel to them, even if
unless you have like a very dry sense of humor.
Unless you are the problem.
Because some people are just like,
some people are just but so I give examples like that. People want to laugh, people like the sense of humor. If you hoy in a little bit of that at the beginning or at the end of the lesson sticks, because you get their attention. There's something different from the usual monotonous daily routine in the classroom.
And I think that also will speak to the actual teacher confronting their own limitations. Because sometimes I am shy.
That's just who
I am. That's just how I am. Can get in the way of that.
Exactly.
It really can.
I did put that in the book to say, you can say, this is my personality, I'm not like that. But you can take your phone, Google a joke every day, even if jokes don't come naturally to you. But we've got Google. Everything is on Google. Whatever you want, you can get there. So you can get good jokes even on Google, and just do a joke per day. It's something that adds a little spice to your classroom. The kids have something to look forward to other than the lesson.
And they can also bring in their own jokes. We can have a rotating joke type of game in the classroom. I like that.
So it makes the classroom alive, and you find that once you start with your lesson, you have their attention. Then you can capture them for that 45 minutes, and then you have their full attention at that time.
But now, some time ago, not sure how relevant that stat is right now, is that there's a significant number of suicides. Amongst teachers, and mental illness.
You know what? I touch on it on how to protect your mental health as a teacher. So I did go into a bit of. A teacher has to have a life outside of their of the classroom. I know there's a lot of admin and a whole lot of other things, but you can't pour from an empty vessel. And I gave an example with a group of teachers I was talking to last month. I said, you've been working as early as from January. Now it's going to be December, and probably you'll be consolidating. You'll start racing after the 15th, just to say. And I was saying to them, and then to those of you that are married, you're going to start planning to go to your in-laws for another 2 weeks, and that's not rest. And so
especially with our culture,
I was actually beckoning them. I said, I think you must take a video for this talk so that you can show the husbands, because
backplay it as often for yourself.
For yourself as well. So I told them it's important to take time off. I know that money is a challenge for you, and I was telling them I met a lady who's a nurse. They save money every month, like 500 a month, and they take a vacation every December for a week to Mozambique or anywhere, but they go as a group of nurses, because they are in a challenging environment together. Now they go and distress together. So I was suggesting to this particular group of teachers that how about you you do
the same
something like that,
thing.
500, something you can spare, and you just take time off. When you finish your December, whatever reports and whatever, you just take that week and go and just enjoy yourself for a week. And, it was like light bulbs came on, because they are so used to serving that they don't get back, and they think we are on limited budget, we can't afford things like that.
Yeah, true.
Whilst there. Then I also touched on support groups, that it would be ideal to have support groups where you just gather and have tea and cake. You don't need to have proper food, and just talk about the challenges you are facing. You might find that somebody else has mastered it. You haven't mastered it, and somebody has mastered it. So there's always information that they can share amongst themselves that they know nothing about. So if you are in Kwandebele, you can have 5 schools coming together once a month, or or bi-monthly. Then they talk about their challenges and how they overcome them and how they solve this, and their strength in that interaction. So I think support groups would make a huge difference.
Sure, we always think support groups in the context of addiction.
Yep.
But
they
or
need
some
to
kind
keep
of
their
trauma.
mental, they need to keep their mental lives in check, because they carry a lot on a daily basis.
Sure.
They carry a lot.
And you speak of the moral code, because I think we've touched on it previously when you spoke about just how much a teacher has to invest in the classroom. It isn't just lesson plan,
it's
curriculum.
beyond,
It is emotional development. It is, sort of looking at their career development as well.
Building self-esteem.
So when it comes to the moral code, we all don't have the same principles and values. So when it comes to a teaching environment where there's diversity of religions and beliefs and everything else, how does one just look at maybe teaching children a basic moral code that will help them, that is non-religious, non-racial,
that is just generic.
Generic, but that can help set them up for a future that they can look forward to, because the world is what it is, and they are living in that element of the world and trying to teach the ones who are coming after them.
So with the moral code, we touched a little bit on issues of, as I like the way you've said it, the backgrounds are quite different, but a child needs basics to integrate into the society. And one of the basics that I talk about there is goal setting. That if we don't teach our kids at a young age to set goals, they struggle even in their adulthood lives. You find a person can be in one place for years because they don't set goals and execute.
And they go from the hamster wheel, from month to month, year to year, without the changes that are necessary. I like Mark Twain. I think he said, if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Exactly. And so I think that's one of the things, the values that should be taught, within the schools. And I also then touched a little bit on teacher-student relationships. That there should be no teacher who's in a relationship with their student, because if you are given a responsibility to oversee somebody who's under your care or your subject, you can't smudge those lines. So there is no teacher who's supposed to make advances to any child, because we know that there are situations in schools where some girls won't get proper marks because the teacher wants to sleep with them, and then they'll give them a 40% because they refused, whatever the case is. So so there I was highlighting on drawing lines, because if you tamper with that part of a child's life, you disorientate the child. They will grow up always looking for older men, to give them things. You set a precedent, and then a child gets addicted to that type. They get socialized like that in their teens, and so even when they are older in varsity, they are always dating CEOs or older men, because because it started at school. So in a way, you add to the moral decay, because then this child is disorientated and they cannot even date on their level. they have to now always date above their level. And this has led to a lot of entitlement we see today, all over social media. A man must have this, a man must do this, a man, and you just sit there like, okay, all these expectations, where do they come from? They have to come from somewhere. It's not just conversations amongst friends. There's a basis. So I talk a little bit about punctuality. That is one thing that people don't take seriously.
True.
And so I tell them the importance of that principle, because we are all on ticking time now. I think COVID,
And it is money.
I think COVID has also taught us that we are on one day it's going to go chup.
Exactly.
It's going to
very
be gone.
quickly.
I won't name all of them, but those are the few I touch on. But the basic moral code around a child interacting with their community and environment, and I also touch on respect and all the other things that are needed, just the basics for a child to be able to integrate to the society.
And you talk about more, you are made for so much more. I think that chapter I look forward to reading personally, because we are all made for more. And it's important for us to never neglect that part of our being. We are expansive beings, just as the universe is like massive and it's limitless and it's in its potential. We are the same. And I think even as teachers, one should look at how far they can go in their teaching fraternity, within the parameters of being an educator. How far can you go?
Well, I was raised by educators, so I tell our story. Okay, we grew up in the rural areas, but my parents were highly resourceful, on top of their profession. So I tell the story of my parents selling things as far as I could remember. I think from entrepreneurship. And we did everything from ice cream to sweets. Then it grew to chickens. Then from chickens, they started doing these second-hand coats. My dad was making quite a lot of money from second-hand coats.
My grandmother lived off those things. Trust me, they are amazing.
Well, my dad would just park the car there, and people will flock there, take 2-3 at a time. And so he used to go to the farms where the farm workers, gather, because they can't go to the shops. So he would bring the clothes to them at an affordable price, and he made quite a bit from that. And he did perfumes, leather jackets. So I grew up knowing my parents are in the education sector, but they were always doing something outside of that. And so I think it also taught us that you're not really limited to, yes, your profession, you can expand, because they also expanded. And then my mom was heading about 33 schools. And then my dad was an executive director for the union after some years, though.
But it's moving up. But it's that element of build yourself up, increase your capacity.
Increase your knowledge. And they were studying for as long as I could remember. And always just beefing up their knowledge, interacting on different platforms. And so we were not rich per se, but we could afford, and they sacrificed for us to even go to good schools as well. So I have a background of both public and private, and I combined that in the book. It's both experiences. So what I'm trying to say is that as a teacher, you're not limited to planting 2 hectares of cabbages that can give you over 200,000. I'm trying to say, you it's not just
that.
It doesn't end there in the classroom. You can expand in any way that you want to expand, provided you make the time for that.
And commitment
to it, because weekends you might be so tired, you might not want to do anything else. But I feel then that's the time to also refresh yourself through the things that make you happy. So if farming makes you happy or planting things makes you happy, then go and
because
go for that.
things that
If
flow
it's
from your
beauty,
passion tend to be very profitable.
If you like beauty, then sell beauty products. Go into that
for
line,
makeup tutorials.
Exactly,
on
exactly.
Weekends,
add on to that salary so that you don't feel like also that people are taking from you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you are doing in return for yourself.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And now in the advent, this is just something different that I want to bring in. In the advent of online learning and online teaching, and everything is going online, and we're happy about that.
Yeah.
What are some of the good advantages that you see in that space?
Oh, well, I'll be honest with you, with the experience that I had, before I talk about the South African context, but with the experience I had with my kids last year during lockdown, I found that my kids really struggled. They're very relational and practical, in nature, and actually their marks dropped remarkably through the online learning. Not because the teachers were bad. I just think that maybe the transition, it was just something they couldn't adjust to. However, we do know how behind we are as a country in terms of technology and all else. So I do not foresee us moving fully in that direction, especially in the rural areas. Maybe for another 20 years, maybe beyond that. We can. But, we do need to acknowledge that things are changing.
Yes.
People are packaging things online. I'm also about to package something online for something that I want to do, because it just makes things easier for those that can afford.
That's true.
The data and can afford the packages. So it makes life easier. We are moving that direction, but I think whether online or not, I took a course online last year and I really enjoyed the lecturer so much. I think I listened to over 16
and it's
hours.
nice, you can rewind and replay.
But I enjoyed him so much. I listened to over 16 hours of what he was teaching without even feeling the strain of those hours. So I think as well with the online, it would probably have to have you'll have to have a certain type of personality to capture the viewer. But that is really something that is happening now, and a lot of people are exploiting that market as we speak. And if you're a coach,
it's ripe for exploration.
if you are a coach or you do anything like that, it's a relevant time to start recording your material and actually selling packages of coaching. But when it comes to the schooling system, I think in the rural areas and other areas will probably be another 20 years plus before we can reach that level, because I'm looking at our economy and our financial state as a country and the level of development, where we are, and some of the things that are happening in other countries that haven't even reached us yet. I saw a very interesting advert. Strange enough, in Botswana, they have an ATM post office. So you can punch where you are sending your letter to.
Wow.
And what
like courier delivery style.
So you punch there like you are going to take out money, but you're actually issuing in a letter that's going to another town.
Hey,
and
Botswana.
So I'm saying, wow, Botswana is right
country. Here you are.
Exactly.
Defeating us, the powerhouse of
exactly.
Africa.
You can check what's going on now, with the post office and everything. So I'm saying, we're not sure how our leaders are going to take decisions, for the coming 10 years. But online learning is something that we could transition to, and it might take time, but it's something that is happening. So we have to catch up.
In its micro state,
So we have to catch up. But we were with a guy who's founded 8 schools, and he actually said they did a study, and they said something like that might not really fully be implemented all over, maybe in the next 30 years.
Okay.
So those that are still interested in starting schools still can. They will still be viable for the next 30 years, but we can't confirm beyond that.
Yeah, but I think ultimately, like technology, I love and I embrace. But I think we are relational beings.
Yeah, the human aspect.
We very much are, and I think even if you have the option of learning in that format and choosing it for yourself, then that I can understand. But I think for the most part, that element of that
eye contact
structure and eye contact and direct, interaction will always be something that's necessary.
No, definitely. I mean, you can see with the Zoom meetings, we were supposed to have a Zoom meeting with some ladies about 2 weeks ago. They're like, no, we are not doing Zoom. We have to meet. And I said, why do you have to meet? They said, so that when we laugh, we can bounce.
Exactly. And you can laugh for as long as you want. Not the program has now shifted, and moved on.
So we found that we're struggling to adjust, because even with the Zoom meetings, we're supposed to discuss business, but we'll start by laughing off other things. We say, guys, we came for this. This is
and
important.
We have an hour.
We have a limited amount of time. So we are relational beings. I mean, that's how God created us.
Definitely.
So I think despite any advancements we might make as a country or whatever the case is as a world, humanity will always matter, and that interaction is important.
But now there's another model of teaching which I'm seeing a lot more people. There's this lady I follow, and she does she looks like she's doing great at it, and I'm so envious. But homeschooling.
Yeah, I've actually got a friend who was homeschooling her kids. It has its upside, I believe, but it also has its downside. I feel the homeschooling environment is productive in a sense that it can easily identify the strengths of a child very early and focus on this. So if your child is into IT and stuff like that, we can now do the coding. And whatever, so
zone
that
in.
Yes, you can zone in and then give them the room to explore whatever they are showing strength in. The individual attention is obviously good, but the real world does not function like that, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to take the child and put them in a university setup with thousands of other people, and I think as well, once they get to a world that is that big, sometimes they realize, oh, I'm not as great as I thought I was,
Which is very important as well. Just for perspective.
For perspective is very important, but I'm trying to say they might be giving themselves a lot of marks for being good at something, only to find the world has a whole lot of other gifted people. It can be a shock, a cultural shock for some kids to say, oh, there are people that get 95%. I mean, I got a shock of my life when I got to varsity. When you look at the marks, I'm like, oh, there's somebody who gets 100% at varsity. Wow, 100%. How does that happen? So, but imagine for a child then who was cocooned in a homeschooling environment. I feel the transition is difficult emotionally once you meet a pool of people, because you are in a controlled, protected environment, and once we throw you in the bigger pool, sometimes to adjust, even relationally, it becomes a challenge. But some parents have a way of balancing that thing out, because they plan socials for their kids and interactions and sleepovers, so they still expose them to the other despite the homeschooling. So it's a lovely concept, but I don't think it's for everybody as well.
True. It can't. I mean, our economy would never function if every mom or dad I mean, we could use tutors and everything else, but I think it'll be a very difficult model to adopt
to fully
universally.
To fully adopt.
But it really has its appeal. I must say.
Does. It looks simpler as well. Relaxed time frames. More fun. More fun than the actual schooling system. So,
And what particularly attracts me about it, just as a parting point, is just the fact that at school we get taught basic principles across the board, and there is a curriculum that is set. So I think that personalized and individualized attention would be more rewarding for the child in the long term. Because if you look at even major success stories, it's stories of people whose parents identified their strengths at a very young age. And they zeroed in on that thing and they hammered them hard for years and years and years, and they developed them quite rapidly. So if I don't need to know Pythagoras or whoever in high school, and I can be a tennis player or a fashion designer or whatever, I think it's really worth it.
It is,
to really look at how you can hone your child's specific talents, you know, without having to educate them on all these other many things that some, frankly, they forget at some point.
I think working with what we have, as, you know, this is now a message for every parent. I think it's important to note your child's interests. They will not be the same. And I've got 3 kids, and all 3 are very different. I mean, my last born is more the thinker. He's into reading. If you get him a good book, I mean, he's 8 and he's already reading. He doesn't get bored reading. So we know that if we get books, we must get more for him, because he just finds pleasure, and he's a loner. So he's one child. He doesn't like noise. He doesn't like a lot of people in his space. So then the second born is more your creative mind. So she's the dancer. She just, you know, wants to dance. So she's very artistic. Anything, even when she's watching TV, anything that has music and movement, she's just going to be stuck. She won't move. You understand? So we've tried to now channel her towards the dancing, the creative part-time. Of course, she's still in the schooling system, but on the side develop at least that interest, you know. And then my firstborn is more your laptop guy. He knows the laptop more than me, the phone more than me. And so forth. So we've channeled him to coding, so that he can develop, you know, maybe go into programming in the long run. But he's got a complicated mind. The easier subjects he doesn't do well in, then the tough subjects he does very well in them. So it's the strangest thing that I find. If you prepare him for his assessments, he's not going to do very well in life skills, but in maths and science and everything that's complicated, he's going to do extremely well. So his mind, I don't know, his mind functions better with complicated things. You know,
he's not a soft skills kind of guy.
So now my point is that you don't need to be a very rich parent. You don't need to you know, to send your child to the most expensive schools, but be observant, be present in your child's life to observe the interests so that you can start polishing them. I would probably be on my 5th or 6th book had I believed that comment earlier, to say you can write, you are doing well at this. I mean, at age 37, I would probably, maybe 10 books even, because I was, 15 at that time, So I'm saying, even if your child is a writer, just get them journals and they just start writing.
Pour it out.
Let them pour it out. That might be a book one day. All the stuff that they write. I've still got stuff that I wrote at varsity. You know, well, it doesn't add up to a book yet, because I'm still
supplement here.
But maybe one day in my 50s I can write the autobiography. Who knows? I don't know. But the point that I'm making is zoom in and see how you can encourage that outside of the schooling system.
And parting shots for the teachers?
Parting words for the teachers. You know, we, on behalf of our generation, we really want to thank you for everything that you have done. You know, going and standing in front of children at the worst time sometimes in your lives. You know, your own children going haywire, maybe your own marriage going haywire. You know, having to stand there and prioritize somebody else above yourself. I think that's one of the most selfless thing
True.
under the sun, you know, to go through so much and still go and pour out. So we appreciate your input, and we also want you to know that your contribution counts, because you are right at the foundation of this, of society. If things go wrong there, then a whole lot of other things go wrong. So we have great leaders today because they went through you. You know, if they didn't go through any teacher, they will be sitting somewhere, you know, under the shade doing nothing with their lives. So we just want to say that your contribution is really visible, and every time we see a great leader, we always think there was somebody behind that. and obviously a teacher. So may all the teachers in SA and beyond be encouraged. Sometimes you will not get the thank you or the compensation that you feel you deserve. But I think another good thing is to get to the end of your life and know that you contributed towards your generation.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be a very satisfying feeling, more than the cosmetics and the other things that we desire and that we want to see. So to all the teachers, we are cheering you on. Keep on doing a great work.
Awesome. How can people get a hold of the book once it gets released?
Well, the book will be released next week on the 6th of December. The launch will be in February, but with the copies that are coming out next week, we'll be ready to start selling at 180. That's a promotional price for the book per copy, and they can contact me on 081 303 2126. 081-303-2126 to make their orders. Then we can courier to them.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Madlamin. I loved having you
Thank
here.
you.
And important work that you've written about. We need to honor our teachers. We need to really pay homage to the profession.
Yes,
and
definitely.
recognize them sufficiently.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
But,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
For having
Awesome
me.
chatting to you. So that's it from us, from the both of us for this evening. I will be chatting to you guys next week again with a different author. Someone I'm hoping will be exciting to all of you as well as he is to me. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to chatting you again next week. May God bless you and have a fruitful week.